Cool. Looks like we're live.
Cool. Welcome, everyone. Fantastic to see you. So happy you could join us. Welcome to Scotch AI, the inaugural podcast where we explore topics to do with machine learning, artificial intelligence, analytics, and Scotch. Got three fantastic experts in the field joining us today for this podcast. I'd like to introduce Danny Ma. Danny, please raise your hand. Say hi, this is Danny. Danny's
Hey
a
everyone,
data
this is
professional with more than 7 years experience solving challenging data problems across primarily retail and financial sectors.
That's correct.
And I'll get you to introduce yourself in a little bit more depth later on. Darren, give us a wave, Darren.
Hey everybody.
Darren is the founder of Fifth Wave Recruiting and has 2 decades of experience working for companies like SAS, SAP, Tableau, Alteryx, and then has recently made a career shift into the recruiting space, I believe. So we'll unpack that and explore that a little bit later, and love to get your perspective on our topic today, which is it a good time to transition careers into data science? And then, of course, Mon, give us a wave, Mon.
Hi.
Mon is definitely the most photogenic of us today and the most well-dressed. Danny would win that competition, but he shaved his mo, so you lost the two, brother. So Mon, surprise. Mon, always a pleasure. Mon is a data scientist with more than 12 years experience working with companies such as eBay, Deloitte, SAS, Microsoft, and now MLABs. And our Scotch of the day is Talitha. We'll have more to talk about her later on. Danny, I've introduced you very briefly, but perhaps you could tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you're a coach, you're a mentor to aspiring data scientists. You've got your own podcast as well. Just tell us a little bit about who's Danny.
Sure thing. So, hi everyone, my name is Danny. I call myself a data professional, but I've kind of worked across pretty much all the different data type of roles throughout my career within Australia. So I've been at times a data analyst, a campaign analyst, a reporting analyst, predictive modeling, data scientist, data engineer, machine learning engineer. I've got quite a lot of experience across all those different roles. And what I tried to do probably halfway through this year is to try and be an active mentor to more people within the data community. I found when I was going through my career and when I transitioned from a data analyst to a data science role, having an active mentor was probably the number one thing that really helped me make my transition. And I'm trying to provide that sort of personalized mentorship for as many people as possible. So I've been writing stuff on LinkedIn. I started running YouTube Lives, and I also run a Slack channel, which has, I think at the moment, just over 500 people. So it's really amazing. It's a really fun community. That's awesome. That's what I've been working on recently.
Right there is pivotal to our topic. So we're going to drill down on that a little bit later, that transition from analyst to data scientist, and even distinguishing those two terms. We'll drill
definitely.
And Mon, there's more to your story than what you've shared. In fact, you're quite the storyteller yourself. You've labeled yourself on LinkedIn as something to do with data and storytelling. I wonder if you could unpack that for us a little bit. There's something fascinating there.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey was a little bit different. I think I studied math, mechanical engineering, and studio art, and all it basically unraveled with storytelling and problem solving, and with the decades, data became part of the storytelling, and so came the storytelling with data as being a data scientist. But my first part of it was applying it mainly in healthcare, where I was working in smart prosthetics for 6 to 7 years. And before I moved to Australia, and then I continued the same sort of storytelling with data, but in different domains in Australia, all the way, and then evolved through that journey in first doing maybe predictive modeling, then into natural language processing. And then now I work with GitLab, where I basically focus on machine learning operations. And the domain still remains kind of the similar healthcare, government, and a little bit of also that bridge between developers as well as data scientists in other domains as well. Yeah.
Sounds really interesting. We're definitely going to hear more about that. And then, Darren, you've made your own career transition just recently. Why don't you tell us about that? I mean, you had a successful background as an account manager in sales, and now you've moved into you've opened your own shop, yeah?
Yeah. Well, taking a step back, Mark, if you look at my career before sales, it was actually in hospitality management. So there's a long story there, but I was a butler for a consulate general in Melbourne. So I may be the only butler that you've met. But subsequent to that, I got into sales and worked my way through numerous organisations, including SAS and SAP and a number of others. Many of them mostly US based, but all related to data and analytics. And my most recent thing, I was at a data analytics consultancy, and they were quite Sydney centric, and I ended up doing a lot of hiring myself for consultants. And both as a candidate and also as a hiring manager, I found some frustration, I guess, in the transactional manner that I was dealt with as either a potential customer or a candidate in the market. And there's a number of aspects to that. Some of that is the fact that it's very transactional, but above and beyond that, there's a lack of understanding, I felt, in what data analytics brings to the table, what it delivers, what a project looks like, what the different personas look like, and then also different technical skills. And so I've taken that frustration and perceived gap in the market and turned that into my own small business, focusing on data analytics people and helping them find their next role.
Yeah, sounds interesting. And you've been 6 months in your current situation?
Yep. Yeah.
So let's drill down on our question now. So is now a good time to shift careers into data science? What are you seeing in the market as a recruiter, Darren, sorry.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of different aspects to it. I'd say contract and temporary work was the first to go out. So, throwing some stats of that, about 30% of casuals and 21% of contractors were the first to lose their job or be stood down. But on the flip side, I think that'll be the first aspect of it to come back to the marketplace. When it comes to data science specifically, it's going to be very industry dependent. So that there are some industries that have massively been positively impacted by the situation and the fact that there's a pandemic, the fact that we're stuck working from home, and some of them are pretty obvious.
Yeah,
some of them.
That's a hard one. Government, healthcare.
No, there's more than that too. Organisations like Catch.com or Kogan, those that had a renowned e-commerce footprint, and then add to that your Coles and your Woolworths. Anybody that's in delivery e-commerce is doing really, really well for obvious reasons. But there are some surprising aspects to it as well. And then other organisations that are also as obvious have been negatively impacted, like the airlines and travel.
Big time.
Yeah, it isn't easy times in Victoria. Specifically, the industry analysts are saying 250,000 people this week will lose their jobs. Add to that, 250,000 have already, since the start of COVID, lost their jobs. So it's going to double this week. I haven't answered your question yet. So, in answer to your question, yes and no. It could be a good time to get into data science if you're looking for it in the right space. I think it'd be challenging for somebody who's fresh out of uni and a grad to get that experience straight as a data science right now. If you were a mid-tier person or a senior person and looking for your next thing, it could be good if you go to the right type of organisation.
Yeah, interesting. Mono, I'd love to hear your perspective on that. So you've not been made redundant due to COVID, but you have transitioned at different parts of your career between different companies that you've worked for, and you're well connected within the community. Have you seen friends lose their jobs? Have you seen other friends get promoted or move into new opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, both ways. A lot of friends, yes, lost jobs. I think it was already on the news with the Big Four consultings. So and being worked in Deloitte, have seen that. But a lot of them have actually quickly also got jobs as well. So again, I think for me, the way I look at it during this situation is, it's a little bit looking back into the 1980 flu, although data science was not a thing there, but there was this whole concept of digitization in their own way. At that time, it was telephones, and how there was a drop in price of telephones. So now with this time, with data science is part of that acceleration of digitization and making machine predictions in this uncertainty. So decision making is in the heart of that. So it's all about then from a strategy perspective of organizations that has made AI use that drop in price of prediction and made it about AI first. So let's say, taking organizations, obviously there's Google, Amazon, they have a strategy of making AI first at the cost of everything else. Or there are organizations who have not had AI as their bread and butter and are figuring out how to have that to make the holistic drop in cost and prediction as well as help in uncertainty. Or there are organizations who are really has not had a digital transformation with AI embedded in it, and they need to look into their cost strategy, all of it put together, drop that first, and later be able to embed that. So I think I've categorized in 3 ways, and it really is about an individual, where you are in this strategy as an organization, as a worker as well, and kind of figure your path through that.
Interesting. And I'm thinking, actually, if I was in one of the organizations that wasn't significantly negatively affected, now is the perfect time to go to the market and grab some really, really good candidates, right?
Absolutely.
Darren, 10-second comment on that one.
I'd say yes and no. Whereas, if you look 6 months ago and you made a advertisement for a data scientist, you might have got tens of applications. Now you will definitely get hundreds, no doubt. But then there's which ones are real data scientists versus which ones are more straight out of a data science master's, and really they should be starting their career potentially as an analyst or something I guess at a lower level. So yes, you'll get lots of applications. Are those applications really the ones you want, or are the people you really want staying hold and hodling onto their to their careers and their jobs using a Bitcoin?
Yeah, you've got the whole idea of AI applied to filtering 600 resumes down to the top 5, but we won't go down that rabbit hole. We might discuss that another time. Mon, I'm curious, friends that you've seen who did lose their jobs and then were able to move into another role fairly quickly. What's the secret? Did they have something? Was it a really, really strong resume? Were they just great in an interview? Is there a common thread there that means, some people in this space are more hireable, or they can land a new role quite quickly? I'm just interested in whether you see any pattern there.
I think it's when it goes back to a little bit on what Darren is saying. Really, it's not actually just all about that whole technical skills. As like, you may have a tool stack, like I can code in Python well, and I know TensorFlow well, but it's also about the application of it. And if you've had that experience where you've been actually be able to solve problems applying it and be able to articulate that well. So the storytelling, the problem solving, and the storytelling of the problem and how you articulate that in that process probably goes a longer way. So I think those were the areas where I personally felt a lot of them could easily sort of get a job. But again, this is it's all about knowing how fit you are for that job and being able to proactively prove that point as well.
Excellent. And we've had a question come in from our audience from Parajat. Question for Danny. Do you think recruiting the term data scientist is still hype nowadays? A lot of managers are just recruiting data scientists because they want to have a data scientist without necessarily knowing what that's going to do for their business, perhaps.
Thank you for the question, Parajat. I think it really depends on where the maturity is for the industry. So let's say in Australia, we're still relatively, I would say, immature in terms of the data science industry compared to, say, the US, for example. In a lot of cases, what we're seeing is it really depends on how the leadership of the data science teams is being run. So if you've come from, if you have like leadership who have come from a traditional analytics background and they don't have as much of the new machine learning and AI and all of that good stuff that's in there, what we're going to see is that there's a tendency to focus on more of the problems which can be solved relatively easily with simple methods. And there'll always be a focus on trying to get those quick runs on the board or quick wins before tackling more challenging problems. So although it might seem that there is a hype in terms of hiring for data scientists, I think a lot of the actual projects that we work on as data scientists, they're not always going to have machine learning or deep learning or anything like that. A lot of the times we come in and we have to build the foundations for the project, do the insights, do the reporting, make sure the foundations are all correct. Then we can suggest, okay, now that we've brought some value to the business, we can try some of these techniques that might improve the accuracy or help with the campaigns or things that might actually make a larger difference using newer technology, which we're supposed to be experts in. I think that's one angle. And the other angle is where people kind of come in from, oh, we need to use machine learning and data science for everything, where they kind of jump straight from the other side of the spectrum. So it really depends on the maturity of where the leadership is at for certain companies. And that usually defines the approach for where people are coming at it from. But yeah, definitely I really think that having the transition from data analyst through to data science and getting that real understanding of, oh, this is how the business uses data. This is how we try and communicate the value of what we're doing. That translates really well into actually tackling projects from a data science perspective, where we start implementing newer methods, more challenging and complex algorithms. And it's like a very natural transition when it comes from how much value you're delivering. I hope that answered the question.
Yep, no, that's great. So what else is involved in that tipping point between the data analyst becoming a data scientist, which was your journey, as we alluded to earlier on? I mean, you've talked about adding value to the business, solving business problems, being able to understand the business context in which you're doing analytics, but there's a little bit more to differentiate or distinguish a data scientist like mine, for example, from just a regular analyst like perhaps myself.
Yeah, I definitely think that so we've all seen the things where there's like data scientist is the sexiest job of the 20th century. The two different types of data scientists, the analyst type and the building type as well. I think when we think of the origins of where the term data science came from, it was originally coming from, there's a comment here saying that Mark's microphone is a little bit fuzzy. Just to repeat.
Yeah, I will need to work on that. My apologies for the quality of the audio. We'll fix it next time.
Yeah, test and learn. Yeah, Mark was asking, what's what's the delineation between what a data scientist is and what an analyst moving into a data science role, and some of the things that they're working on, and what are the gaps that people should be looking to upskill in and fill. I really think that from the original version of what the data scientist was, it was traditionally someone who came out of a research background. They had a PhD or a master's in statistics, and they came from pretty much the cream of the crop of all those US-based universities, and they'd move into big tech. So we're thinking of Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, the FANG companies, where they would actually be running large-scale experiments on customers. So if you've heard of the LinkedIn, the LinkedIn connections, or Facebook with their knowledge graphs, all of these things were experiments, and then they were turned into data products. So in the, let's call them original gangster data scientists, but they would essentially be your researchers who then had to learn how to use the data that's coming out of these large digital platforms. And then they would then have to try and run some scientific method to actually grab out the insights to then derive what the product and where the whole business should actually go to. These days, what we're seeing is data scientists is more just people who build predictive models, people who use machine learning algorithms. And there's quite a difference to what the original term was. But I think the main takeaway would be anyone who's using data and trying to get insights, generate value out of them. I think we don't need to stay within these terms of, oh, you're a data scientist, you're a fake data scientist, you're a machine learning engineer. All of these are just based off what skill sets that you've been using in the role that you're in currently. You might have a really great analyst who's actually been applying machine learning algorithms. Do you need to give them a title for it? I think titles are, in these days, they're starting to become more and more blurred. And I think when we're trying to hire people, we're just looking for some of the experiences that they have, and usually some portfolio projects that demonstrate that they have the required skills, or they can demonstrate their learning to actually pick up some of the skills on the job, is more important than actually having 3 or 5 years working as a data scientist role somewhere. So,
and so perhaps that transitions over to a question for Darren. If someone is in that particular place, actually, I've got one question from the floor. I'll throw to perhaps Danny or Darren quickly. R or Python? The eternal question from George. Thank you, George.
Okay, so George, I'll tell you what I did. I essentially started learning Python like almost 6-7 years ago on the side, like at 5 a.m., waking up at 5 a.m. and then just learning the language purely without any application. And then eventually I started getting to the point where I can actually use it for some data projects. So I started using Kaggle. Then after a few more months, then I felt comfortable applying for a role which was closer within the data science space, which was an analyst role within digital analytics. And from there, I kind of moved my way into an actual data science project where everyone was using R. So you kind of, what I would suggest these days is probably just use Python. Python is probably the lingua, what do they call it? Lingua de franca, the de facto language for machine learning and data science. If you're coming from an analytics background, it might actually be worthwhile actually learning R first if you're looking to do more data visualizations and insights and reporting work. The learning curve is relatively less steep for R if you've come from a really strong data background, which for 14 years, that's quite a long time as well. So yeah, I think that might be the go for me. I would try both and see which one works better for you.
Perhaps that's not a bad piece of advice as well. I'd love to drill down on that a little bit further. But we have a question from Mon. There is a perception that data science is still like a black box to the business user. You've talked about working closely with the business to make it less of a black box, more visible and more accessible to the business. Could you talk to that just a little bit?
Yeah, I think that actually goes back to this whole process of what we actually call MLOps, and the concept of MLOps was originally historically looking into how any software application was built where there was no machine learning. So that's DevOps, and taking those practices into MLOps to make things more digestible, to make sure that everyone is collaborating, and then there's visibility as well as explainability of your algorithms, whether it's for going to the code or also in the people, process, tools, technology part of it. So the first part, and this is something. This is actually a group of people. They call the destructive construction labs in Toronto, and they actually spent a whole decade actually trying to actually figure this out, because data scientists, they like to be left alone. They do the experimentations and they don't like to be bothered, while the business, they have a different set of timelines and they look at it differently. So they looked into actually building that. So what they built is actually a very simple, this is called a canvas way of looking into it, where they literally look into, what is it that you're trying to predict? What are the metrics of success? How do you actually, what is the data that is coming? How is it, how is it trained? What is the outcome of it, the feedback? Literally having these sessions and putting it down before starting to go into solution mode and then retracing it back. This is a simple step that gets it all together. And the other part is looking into actually how DevOps looked into when it goes into agility and building things together, where you don't have to, from experiment to production, have a lot of frictions and have it done siloed. So two parts, looking into Professor Agarwal's AI canvases, and the second part is actually looking into DevOps framework and being used into MLOps, how you actually collaborate together to build something amazing.
Interesting, I like it. I want to transition over to Darren. MLOps, Auto ML, some of the new products, H2O, Data Robot, Azure ML, Data IQ, Google has a product, AWS has a product. Are you seeing a lot of demand for this area of Auto ML and MLOps and that whole space? Is that something that someone would want to have on their resume?
I don't think it's a bad thing to have on your resume, because I think it'd be a bit different to the majority who are focused on code-based learning, at least, and next certificate in R or Python or whatever it might be, and that would potentially allow you to position yourself. But I'm not seeing a lot of roles in the marketplace that are calling out specifically for those skill sets. And having worked in that side of the market, I think there are certain organizations who will have both Auto ML and your traditional code-based ML in place, and there certainly is a place for both of them. So, could be a differentiator, but I haven't seen a massive uptake in Australia yet of Auto ML. There seems to be a real focus on code, which for me is a little bit of back to the future. Why not automate if you can? But anyhow, I'm not the expert. You guys are.
That's interesting. Danny, any thoughts?
Yeah. Can I add a point to the black box perception for the data science question? So the original was there's a lot of black box perception for data science within business users. How do you make it more, or how do you work closely so it's less invisible and not invasive? I think it's usually a challenge to the data science teams or the machine learning teams to actually communicate really clearly how the outputs will actually be used within the business processes. So let's say, okay, we build a model. What are we using the model outputs for? Are we targeting the top 10%? How do we actually measure whether that will lead to any difference in the business? I think having really close collaboration with business people from the data science side is where we'll see a lot of success now and moving into the future as well. What we see now is a lot of the code moving back to the ML ops and the auto ML and all of this sort of stuff. We're seeing a lot more automation within this space, but it doesn't mean that people who are trying to come into this area, that they shouldn't learn the underlying basics. Usually when I talk to my people, I just tell them, okay, look, you can learn some of these auto ML things, but for your own interest, you might as well try and build something yourself and understand the different parts that actually go into it and the different components and the ways of thinking and all those sorts of things before jumping into an auto ML product. Also, if you're going to learn an auto ML product, if you make yourself a specialist in that area, you sometimes might pigeonhole yourself. Think of it like, okay, you are now the Azure guy. You're not, and you make that your specialty. Yes, that's very good if you're looking to get Azure roles, but if you want to be more of like a Swiss Army knife, you should more demonstrate, oh, look, I've learned, I know Google, I've worked on AWS, I've worked with the data robot tools, Alteryx, having a wider variety and demonstrating that you can learn on the job and having a much broader range of experiences might actually be better in this environment. That's my view on the auto ML anyway. For the ML ops is a bit more specialized. So when we think of ML ops, it's usually more within the engineering disciplines. So you'd have usually everything these days in automation and productization in most companies will be Docker based. If not on the cloud, it's on premise, and usually it's deployed using some sort of Kubernetes cluster that manages all the scaling and the redundancies and all that sort of stuff in production. So I think having knowledge of what goes on under the hood is very important. Whether you need actual hands-on experience when you're trying to move into a specific role, I think these days it's becoming less and less important. A lot of these technologies you can learn by yourself for free almost in a very interactive playground. And I think that's where the whole industry is starting to move towards, where it's less about specialized, oh, I know everything about machine learning algorithms, and more about having a generalized experience to say, look, I know some stuff here, I know some stuff there, I know how things work end to end. And I think that's where the main focus should be moving towards in the coming future.
Interesting. Good advice, Danny. And we're getting some positive feedback through the chat window as well. People are grateful for your comments. I want to shift just a little bit to Mon. Thinking of career transitions, we were talking yesterday about the need for, you can follow the dream or the star of becoming a data scientist, but if it's not something that you actually love doing, it's probably not the thing that you want to do, because then you're just going to become, disillusioned and bored with your job that isn't your passion. And we talked about passion yesterday. Do you want to just sort of play back some of that for us? Because I think it's highly, highly relevant when people are considering a potential career move, either from a domain specialty into data science or from an analytics background into data science. Just share your thoughts.
I think that goes back to I think one of the comments was, data science is a hype, and anything and a hype has its pros and cons. So I've had a lot of people go, oh, I'm a Java developer. How do I get into data science? Because it's just the coolest word, without really thinking a little bit more of, what is it that you actually really like, and having a better understanding of what data science is. So I think the interesting part about where we are now in that journey, and data science, like I think I always say, it's a thesis of time. And we're scratching the surface of a lot of different skill sets we need. So earlier, it was just a predictive model, and then we went into even NLP. Now we're talking about like auto ML, MLOps, and all of us are in different time zone for it. But that clearly shows that, and then we talked about business people as well. So it clearly shows that there's this whole variety of skill sets. It's no more just just the PhD in math, or it's no more just someone from a computer science background. So it's a lot of various different skill sets, and in this journey, where there will be a time when, or or maybe that AI becomes the bread and butter of a business. And so you will have people from strategizing to problem solving to storytelling, and data is going to be that fuel for it. So for the way I look at it is, if you do want to be part of the data storytelling journey, figure out your own strengths of what you are really, really good at. It could be coding, it could not be coding, and that's okay too. And figuring out how you can actually match yourself into that journey, and you will have more valuable outcome through that, rather than just having it focused on like 10 skill sets learned for data science and figuring out, rather than being understanding what is a problem you want to solve, what is that journey with time that you want to take, and what are your core skill sets. And I think that is where the passion lies, and also goes into the problem solving part of it.
Sounds good. And a quick question from George, slightly related to that. Is there an opportunity at the intersection of data science and product management? And what would be the best way to blend those skill sets?
I'm just taking them up, but yes, absolutely. That actually goes back to again, if you're machine learning operations, that whole science is also about getting. If you're building a data product, how do you actually manage that? Which is very, very different to a DevOps or agile product management, to actually a machine learning, because in the machine learning science, there's a lot of experimentation and iteration as a part of it. So that management is kind of quite different. So there is definitely that intersection, which is basically the first part of ideation of a machine learning product in that MLOps cycle. So you start with the idea and then you go into production, and that's an infinite loop. That first part of the idea is that intersection of data science, product management, business domain, all of that as a part of it. So yes, definitely, there is a massive intersection. We are still starting to unravel it, scratch the surface of what that means, take frameworks from different various historically well-proven parts and put that together to sort of build that. But there is absolutely a need of it. And I personally think that should be a part of anyone's resume when people have that because it's a unique skill set.
Can I add some thoughts to this one as well? So when you think of, Mark's camera has gone black. But it's okay. We'll just continue on. When we think of product management, usually we can think of it. So I'm very passionate about startups, for example. When you think of product management, usually we can think of it as new features that a startup might actually deploy and go live to their customers. And the data science component usually comes in when you want to run experiments. So things where you apply the scientific method to try and actually get some learnings out of various things where you can actually test and learn to actually move your product or your startup forward. And I think having good understanding of the data science in terms of the intricate statistics of some of those metrics, as well as being able to design good experiments, is super important when you want to blend that in with some of the product management skill set as well. And I think, what we'll see in future is probably more leadership types that actually run the leadership for products. You might see them having more of a statistical background or design background, where they're actually designing some of these experiments to move their company forward. Yeah, interesting. Good one. Darren, final thoughts, and I'll just throw out this question very quickly from the audience as well, and then we'll look to wrap up. Just, final thoughts from Darren.
Thanks for that. So I guess in summary, there's definitely been decline in data science roles or any roles, but not as massively impacted as other professions. On SEEK, there's still more than 500 jobs actively in Australia for, if you put in the keyword data scientist. So the roles are still out there. it would be hard. People are using the word pivot quite a lot. It would be hard to pivot from a different type of unrelated role into data science, for sure. It would be hard as well for a grad straight out of uni to jump straight into a data scientist role, unless they were looking for a junior. So I think from my end, focus on your end goal. Like Mon said, focus on your passions, know your strengths, know where you fit in, and then you'll be fine at the end of the day. And I'd encourage everybody to stay positive as much as possible.
Sounds good. Any final thoughts?
I'd like to answer that question around the formal education, actually, and
Okay,
then
let's
wrap
do
up
that.
as well. Sorry, just want
No
to
problem.
deliver the value. Okay, so when we think of formal education, I guess we're talking about like masters in analytics or masters in data science, or a bachelor's degree in data science, and using that as a transition point to move into a career in data science. One of my main hypotheses is that we don't need actual degrees to get into data science. I really think that in terms of if you can display and demonstrate some of your experience and skills and being able to actually do the job, and this can be in the format of, let's say, I don't know, like a really strong GitHub portfolio with lots of projects that are working end to end that showcase a lot of your skills. It could be running a blog and sharing your thoughts on everything about data science, data analytics, where it's moving in the industry, posting a lot on LinkedIn and trying to build up your personal brand as maybe not necessarily a thought leader, but just someone who's out there trying to share their experiences to help others in the same journey. I think that's more important than formal education, because what we're seeing now is usually, as there's more and more education, it starts to become commoditized. People think, okay, I need to do my master's in data science before I can work as a data scientist. Not always the case. And I think people working in the industry, when they're hiring for people, yes, we sometimes use the education as kind of like a hard filter. Sometimes some companies will actually do that, but whether you would like to work for those companies is another question. So I think it's narrowing down your search for some companies who might look for people that don't have the formal education, and they actually value the experience much more than any certificate. I think that's really important. But yeah, I think there's currently in the industry, probably it is based on experience now, but you can definitely demonstrate those things by your actions. And I think that's really important. But yeah, I think that sort of summarizes my view as well. I think everyone should continue working on building up their skills and experiences, regardless of whether it's paid, free, learning from people on LinkedIn, tuning into these lives that we have. I think there's a lot of learning to be had out there. And I challenge people to stick with it and just keep improving day by day.
And can people approach you in terms of a coach or a mentor, Danny? Or are you full?
Oh, yep. So Mark is asking if people can come to me for mentorship. So I'm currently running a Slack community, which is under the hashtag Data with Danny on LinkedIn. You can also look at my profile. There should be sign-up links in there also. I'm currently working on some semi-stealth stuff so I can transition to do this work full-time and continue delivering value for everyone in the global data community. So yeah, just keep an eye out. I hope I'll make an announcement soon, but yeah, some super exciting stuff up ahead.
Excellent. And Mon, any final thoughts?
I would echo Danny, but I would also maybe talk a little bit about, it's not about really like a skill set or a formal education, but it's really important to learn how to learn. And I think that because it's not really about, is Python today the language, or is R today R tomorrow language, but it's really understanding fundamentally what is computer language and why is it relevant. So if we say today that Python is the English of human-computer interaction, what does that actually mean? So those fundamentals and constantly being able to learn how to learn is really, really key. Whether for I think any career, but more so in something like in data science, where things are constantly changing quite fast. So that is, I would say, the key is not a formal education. Yes, you could take training courses to learn a language, to learn a tool set, to learn an algorithm, all of that. But that fundamental of learning how to learn is probably the most important. And then, echoing what I said, it's also about your passion. It's also about happiness, and all of that put together to actually create the poetry of AI or the code, and take everyone in that journey as well. So that's very, very important.
Thank you, Mon. Fantastic. And speaking of happiness, it's time to introduce our friend, Scotch AI. This is a Talisker. Talisker is a Speyside Scotch from the far northeast of Scotland, where you get a lot of salty breezes coming in. I was introduced to Talisker at Quantium, Danny. We used to have the whiskey club on a Friday afternoon, you might remember, until it was shut down by a new HR director. And I had to go out and find a good Scotch, so I went and brought some Talisker, and you can definitely taste the saltiness in the bouquet of the whiskey. Now, I'm not going to drink it on camera. I'll save that for later. But I just want to thank our audience. It's been fantastic. We've had over 30 people join. We had over 100 registrations, which is a fairly typical turn-up rate. Mon, thank you. Really appreciate your passion and your perspective and your stories. Danny, everybody's loved your really wise instruction. And everybody, you can follow up with Danny through that hashtag Data with Danny. Find him on LinkedIn. And Darren, thanks again for your perspective, and really, really wish you well with your endeavor, having moved now into the recruiting space at possibly a very challenging time in the economic cycle. We will be back in 2 weeks' time for our second podcast of Scotch and AI. I believe I will be interviewing, okay, I'll keep it a secret now. I've got to confirm a few speakers, but we're going to have a lot of fun. So everyone, thank you so much for joining. It's been 45 red hot minutes. Love the content, love the interaction, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Darren. Thanks, Mon. Thanks, Danny. Thanks, everyone.